A squad of Israeli army soldiers moves carefully through dry terrain. They have spotted something that arouses their suspicion. A dark opening, covered by a hatch, leads to an underworld, which is nothing like what lies above. This is an IDF training drill being conducted at a facility in southern Israel, which prepares Israeli soldiers for tunnel combat.
Hamas's use of attack tunnels has made underground warfare the #1 priority for the IDF on the Gaza front. Most of the Israeli army's infantry units now have to pass through one of these facilities that simulate underground warfare as part of their training.
These drills give me the information I need to know what a tunnel looks like, how to view it, how to approach it. When I encounter a tunnel opening, I know what to do, period. We approach and there's an order of action. Our expertise might not be the same as commando units, but we know what to do and we have confidence in our ability.
Both special and standard IDF combat units are required to train for this form of combat, which is unique on several levels.
What they experience here is the pressure and the feeling of being in a closed space. The eye contact, the ability to command is changed completely. You can maybe see the person right in front of you, but not more than that. If you're talking about a platoon of 50 soldiers or a squad of 15, you can understand the complexity of fighting in a place like this.
The soldier at the head of the formation carries this massive shield, a piece of equipment that recalls ancient times, but can still provide critical protection in a confined space.
The ones who engage are the first, second, and third in line, those leading the force, the company commander. They're the ones coming into contact. They're the ones who will see the threat first and handle the situation.
Hamas has invested a huge amount of resources in tunnels that burrow under the Gaza border and into Israeli territory. The group has its own units devoted to tunnel warfare.
They train as well, but we train more. We may rest a bit when it's especially hot, but we train day and night. We invest our energy here and in other places.
One senior Israeli officer has warned that the tunnels could become a death trap for Hamas if the group chooses to make use of them in future attacks. Still, the threat is a daunting one.
There will always be that initial fear of helplessness, because when you step into something like this, when you're not on a training base but deep in Sajaya, then yes, you'll feel a little helpless and scared. But if you keep in mind that you're defending the state of Israel, then you'll stay on track and be fine.
Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News.
Well, Shai Ben-Ari joins us in the studio, along with Dr. Chuck Freilich, a former Deputy National Security Advisor here in Israel. Shai, you mentioned the resources that Hamas is putting into these tunnels. Of course, the IDF destroyed some, I think, 3 dozen tunnels in that Gaza operation. Do we know how many tunnels there are now?
We don't know definitively, I would say. One official has been quoting saying there are at least 15 attack tunnels running under the border. That figure has also been denied by the Israeli Minister of Defense. The simple answer is we simply don't know, and also the Israeli army doesn't necessarily know how many tunnels are running under the border at this stage. It's also important to remember these tunnels that run under the border are known as attack tunnels, but the vast majority of the Gaza tunnels are actually defensive systems. That's not to say that the people inside them don't have hostile intentions. We're talking about command and control centers, bunkers, places that act as storage facilities. These are the main reasons why the Hamas leadership has remained basically unharmed in all the conflicts that we've seen over the past few years. But interestingly, these soldiers tell us that they also train for scenarios where they go into these defensive tunnel systems as well.
Okay. Dr. Freilich, very impressive seeing that training facility. But it raises the question, why wasn't something like that set up a little more than a decade ago when a tunnel was used to kidnap Gilad Shalit from under the Gaza border?
You can always ask that question, and it's always a good one. Look, I think we have to try and put this issue in a little bit of perspective. The tunnel threat is important, and I would put the primary emphasis on the defensive tunnels rather than the offensive ones. Tzahal, the IDF, is taking this seriously. Maybe belatedly, we are dealing with it seriously today. Now, I want to be careful here because people's lives are at stake, so I want to be sensitive. On the one hand, if we lose, we could lose a good few people here.
Sure.
And if it's just one, that is one infinitely too much. It is, on the other hand, to put it in proportion, it is hard to imagine a scenario, when I'm talking about the offensive tunnels, in which the result is worse than the kinds of horrors that we experienced, let's say, with suicide bombing.
I see, yes.
Now, that, again, that's a horror, but it's a specific horror, it's a local one, it's a tactical problem. It isn't a strategic threat to the state of Israel.
I understand. Of course, the people living on the Gaza border have their concerns, but you did make reference to that, so we do understand that. Speaking strategically, here we're talking about tactically defending these tunnels, against these tunnels. Strategically, is there any realistic way of trying to pressure Hamas not to build these tunnels in the first place?
Our problem today is actually that the level of pressure on Hamas is too heavy.
Okay.
Israel finds itself in the somewhat awkward position today of being the advocate for easing pressures on Hamas. We've tried to encourage the Egyptians to ease up because we understand today that the pressures on Hamas before the last round, the war in 2014, were probably too heavy and at least contributed to the outbreak of that war, and we're afraid that it could happen again.